Businesses have been thinking a little bit more about like, how do I make a dispersed, decentralized business centralized? How can I connect my employees to things that are in another employee's home or another employee's satellite office? So all of those have created kind of a storm for businesses to really be thinking about, how do I operationalize this thing called circularity or circular economy? And we think we have some really great answers. You need technology and reuse to actually connect people who have stuff with people who need it within the same organization or who need it in the community. So we build at a high level, we build technology to help organizations with reuse. But what does that feel like? It feels like your employees going to a platform of the stuff you already own before they go buy something new outside of your organization. Or an employee recognizes that there's something that they have in their possession that they no longer need. They can make that available to everyone in your organization through our platform. And it really helps reduce procurement spend on the one hand, but also waste creation and carbon emission on the other end.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Realcomm Live. It is so good to be back. As most of you know, we don't take the summer off per se, but the reality is we gather so much great content on the Realcomm Live stage at our events in June that we could not let those conversations go to waste. So what we do is during the summer, we kind of go through the best of the best, and that's what you've been viewing every week since the middle of June. And Ian and team has done a great job deciding on what topics to show you. And it was a phenomenal run. But here we are back live and excited to talk about what's going to be happening this fall. For those of you who are new to us, we kind of shift gears a little bit in the fall, and we move from the commercial real estate conversation, Realcomm, and the smart building conversation, IBCon, and we move into the core tech corporate real estate and facility conversation for the fall. And this year we've actually added BuildingsAI to the core tech agenda, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But the focus is more on the tenant side of the conversation. So in a corporation, they may have a big campus, headquarters, they may lease regional space in major cities like New York, Chicago, and LA. In some cases, they may have retail. So the business drivers and the business needs of corporate America, as far as their real estate needs, are different. And so the technology that we apply to those is different as well. So we thought we'd kick off the first live episode with three great guests, our co-chairs for Core Tech and our Core Tech 23. There'll be Frank Cuevas, the VP of Global Real Estate from McKesson, Bobby Louissaint, Head of Technical Partnership Engagements, Global Shared Services of Meta, and hopefully Kay Sargent, Senior Principal Director of Workplace at HOK, who I believe just got off a plane from London. We may or may not see her, but Kay's a trooper and is going to try to get in. So let's bring on our guests and get this conversation started. Gentlemen, how are you?
Morning.
Good morning, Jim.
Great to see you. Great to be back live on Realcomm Live, and what a great way to open up the season. The experience that we have on this call, and don't be surprised if Kay pops in. She's done that before. She will be running down the terminal with a cell phone on the call, but she is a trooper and probably one of the most seasoned travelers in our industry. So if she pops in, don't be alarmed. So again, thank you for being here, and thank you for being the co-chairs for Core Tech 23. Frank, why don't we just get started with, give the audience a little bit about your background, the seasoned, the deep seasoned experience you have, and we'll do the same with Bobby, and then we're going to get right into our conversation.
Absolutely. So I've been in the industry for the better part of 30 years and have been fortunate enough to lead some fabulous teams at some really good companies. I started out my career at AIG, moved into the financial industry banking at Citigroup, and then eventually Deloitte, IBM, DXC, and then here at McKesson. In all of those companies, I've had various roles and have really got a broad perspective on the overall corporate perspective of the industry. So I sit in a very unique place today because I really hire experts to do what they need to do, but yet I try and look for the strategic ways in which I can provide direction to make things not just better, but to make things more effective and more efficient.
So specifically, IBM and Deloitte, they have a long reputation of being innovative and taking risks as it relates to a design of a corporate real estate portfolio, the workplace, and certainly the use of technology in the built environment. Any color or comment on those two organizations specifically?
Yeah, I really impressed with Deloitte. Over the years, they have just been forward thinking in their approach to combine both the technology and the workplace together and to create a better experience. Now, their workforce is a bit unique, right? A lot of their teams are have been hybrid for quite some time, being that they're consulting firms, but really ahead of their time in so many different ways. And we could point to either some of their unique facilities that they built in Europe, as well as in some other locations. IBM, same thing. IBM very focused on AI at the time I was here, and we were making a lot of headway around how do we involve the real estate conversation to take advantage of the tech that IBM was promoting and doing a lot of really good things in. And so it was very forward thinking. We even got to the point at one point we were talking about every conference room having AI built into it, so that we could actually have almost a Siri, if you will, in every conference room. Just for some really interesting thought.
Yep. Well, and specifically on IBM and Deloitte, that conversation goes back to the late 80s, early 90s, where both organizations were really at the forefront of hybrid models, flex hot desking. And it's funny now we're talking about it as if it's a new idea, and it is literally 30 plus years old, right? And it's just interesting to watch how it evolves. Bobby, Meta, that's a fast moving tech company, Facebook, Instagram, and others. Tell us a little bit about your past and a little bit of what you're doing now at Meta.
Sure. So again, Bobby Louissaint with Meta. My career spans probably, I'd say overall 28 years, mostly in security industry, technology. So physical security technology, so not cyber. Started my career with ADT and was with ADT, Tyco, Johnson Controls for about 22 years. I spent about 15 years as director of national accounts for the West. So I managed a lot of corporate clients that were based out of the West Coast. So anything from a Chipotle to a 24-hour fitness to Ross Dress for Less. I managed Staples Center for about 15 years here in LA. And then also Meta, Facebook at the time, Microsoft, and Google. So quite a bit of experience deploying security solutions for those companies, working in a lot of different construction projects and supporting design and the architecture for physical security in those spaces. And joined Meta about 4 years ago. At the time, we were Facebook. And my role here is more of a strategic role on how we strategize in deploying security tech originally. When I first came on, I reported into global security. And then as of this year, back in March, we were transitioned to a new organization within Meta called Global Shared Services, part of some of the efficiency work that the organization has been doing, and where we are supporting technology now for all of building technology. So not just security, but everything else within the building our team supports. And so with that, the intent of my role is to help support strategy and networking and understanding for not just security, where I've been spending most of my career, but now on the building side, which led me to Realcomm through some partners that I know. And then now just trying to get involved in understanding, what are some of the best practices that we could be utilizing and how we manage and deploy technology within our building spaces. Who can we partner with to understand what's been going on in their spaces? How do they utilize technology? But then also to help provide influence on standardization. We talked to Jim a little bit about cybersecurity protocols that might be needed into the space. But also, like, what does the future really look like in this space? How do we utilize AI into the future? How do we plan for it? And how do we strategize the business and prepare the business to be able to utilize AI in the future?
Well, and just, looking at the companies you both work for and your credentials, McKesson, Fortune 10, huge company, a lot of employees, Meta, one of the top technology companies in the world. It's really interesting to see how this journey of real estate and technology is coming together. And Bobby, being at Meta, I mean, you can walk down the hall and get access to the best AI, 5G, immersive, hyperspace or metaverse context and support folks you can find. That's going to help in your journey. I mean, having access to those tools, those people, and like we talked a little bit earlier, no pushback. They're innovative by nature.
Yeah, and it's really refreshing to be here. I will say that, and it's definitely a plus in understanding like the direction that we could be headed in when it comes to AI and how we utilize AI into the future. The complicated part about that is also understanding what it's going to take, right? The amount of resources that need to be available for us to really deploy AI in an efficient manner. And then also making sure that the data that we're looking to utilize with AI is clean and that it makes sense. So there's probably a lot of work ahead of us in regard to preparing to really utilize AI the way we want to. It's not a flip of the switch like everybody thinks. It's definitely a journey, I want to say, in order for us to get where we want to be.
Yeah. So both you guys have got good long experience. And prior to the pandemic, digital transformation in the real estate world, making some progress. Conference rooms were getting a little bit more engaging. Some people were working in a mobile capacity, a little bit of remote maintenance here and there, turning things on and off from different locations, and a reasonable approach to the E and ESG, the carbon footprint. Then the pandemic hits. Frank, can you give us an idea of how much did your trajectory change pre and post pandemic as it relates to your real estate strategy?
Well, I joined McKesson at about the time that the pandemic was starting, but I can tell you there's just been a fundamental change in the way we're viewing our strategy around real estate since the pandemic started. And prior to that, of course, everyone and most organizations are focused on utilization, right? Upwards of 60, 70%, always trying to hit that 90% mark. And, suddenly it was like a light switch, as Bobby mentioned, with regard to other things. One day, nobody was coming in. And so from a strategic perspective, I think most organizations, McKesson included, had to really rethink what the future of their portfolio would look like, had to rethink what the future of work would look like. And, quite frankly, I think early on, nobody really knew the answers to that. And even today, there is still a tremendous amount of ambiguity around the topic or even differences of opinion, right? And that will continue. So from a post to a pre-pandemic or pre to a post-pandemic strategy, our view was that it would never go back to being what it was pre-pandemic. And so we had to make some changes in our tens of millions of square feet of portfolio to accommodate for that. And so it looks very different than it did pre-pandemic.
Well, and I think it's not, we cannot lose the irony that the head of real estate for McKesson is a mobile warrior sitting in an airport the airport needs to be equipped to be able to handle you doing a podcast on the fly, right? That is the new reality, right? And so very, very appropriate. Bobby, how about you? Pre and post?
Pre and post, interesting. If for those who've never been to Facebook's campus pre-pandemic, I would say it was like walking into Manhattan and being on Times Square. It was a packed place, cars everywhere, people everywhere. We have shuttles, we had buses, it was just a thriving environment. And we were an in-office company pre-pandemic. Then the pandemic hit, and I think a lot of us thought we would be back in the office in a few weeks. After a few months, we started to realize that that wasn't going to happen. And so buildings that were completely packed, and I'm talking, you couldn't find a conference room, you couldn't find a desk. It was very complicated sometimes. A lot of the times, the building that I worked in, I'd have to go to a completely different building to find a conference room and find space. To being completely empty was probably pretty shocking. And we work very closely with the medical community, so we had an understanding of what COVID could be, but I don't think the world really understand that it was going to shut us down the way it did. And so we started doing research, started benchmarking with other companies to understand the type of technologies that we were going to need to protect our spaces. We all probably went through the temperature sensor thing, whether it was a handheld or people were installing thermal cameras. I mean, I think people went a little bit crazy with that, but at the end of the day, we ended up, understanding that wasn't really going to help us, and that we were going to have to ride this thing out. We weren't really sure how long it was going to last, and it lasted probably a lot longer than we ever thought it would. And so fast forward to today, we are drastically different. As of September 5th, I believe it was, we announced back to office. We've been pretty much hybrid mostly. We have now remote work. I'm a remote worker myself. I live in Los Angeles. My office is in the Bay Area. And, I will say that it's been a pretty uneasy space to kind of understand, what is the future going to be like for us? I don't think we know today. And so, when we talk about utilizing AI and analytics and data from our systems to understand how we're showing up in buildings, that is technically how we're trying to evaluate what the future is going to look like. But we're doing it pretty much in iterations, trying to understand every piece of the business as it goes. And I think today we're probably in the most comfortable spot in really understanding what the future might look like. But again, it's very assumptive. Even with the data that we're providing, right? So we are back to office. It's not at nowhere near the capacity that it ever was. We definitely have remote workers now that represent a pretty significantly sized part of the organization. But there's a really good sense about getting back to the office and figuring out what that is. And, we've shifted away from permanent desks. We're now moving to more of a shared desk model, or desk hoteling is what we're calling it. I think a lot of people call it that. And being able to provide flexible spaces for the business in order for us to shift, because that's the other thing. We have a lot of buildings, a lot of building spaces, and based off of the data, we've had to consolidate a bit. So moving out of certain buildings because occupancy really wasn't there. And then on top of that, we're going to continue to manage, what the data looks like and understanding how we need to shift in the future.
Well, what we've noticed is that the pandemic was long enough to actually change behavior.
Oh, yeah.
And so now that the pandemic is over, we're fighting people's unhappiness with 2-hour commutes, with a lack of flexibility to run the kids to daycare in the morning. All those habits that were learned during those 2 years, that's what I think where we're at.
Right.
But I think at the end of it, we're going to come up with the new solution. And I think it's challenging, but it's also pretty exciting.
And I might add, just Jim, that the new solution I think is going to be very different by industry and certainly by company, because as Bobby was speaking about what Meta is deciding to do, McKesson, as an example, is not mandating that their employees return to work in their office environments, right? And so it's going to be very different by individual company. And that's one of the things that I think that discussion keeps happening today, where people think it's going to be one answer for everyone. And I think it'll be a bit different.
Well, and what's funny is you used to attract talent by saying, come to this big, beautiful campus with all these amenities. And now some of that talent is saying, I want the flexibility. That's the rub.
That's right.
And I think for us, I mean, I'm glad you bring that up, Jim. I try not to talk about the amenities too much, but we definitely have some significantly cool,
beautiful
amenities, right? I mean, you get to eat for free, and we have laundry service. We have lots of services to provide for employees. You technically don't have to leave the campus. I mean, you can be there. You just need to find a place to sleep. is what I used to tell people. And even for me, I commuted to the Bay Area. I'd fly in on Tuesdays and I'd be there till Thursday, take advantage of all the amenities. And I really didn't have to do anything else outside other than find a place to sleep. And so it was very attractive. And, you know, people's mind frames have absolutely shifted. You had, you know, for us, we had a lot of people coming from everywhere to the Bay Area. And so their homes weren't there. Their families weren't there. So during COVID, a lot of them had to go back home. So they had support. And now that they're used to having that support again, we also proved that we were able to be pretty efficient in work remotely. So we've proven that we can work remotely. But I think the biggest concern that we've had is we've lost a little bit of the creativity that you find between the engineers when they're together, right? And they're able to throw ideas, you know, back and forth across the desk. That's more of what we're looking to bring back into the office. It's more of that creativity. We are a creative engineering company, so you know, it's not just that we're providing services. It's more about the creativeness of what we do and bringing back our employees.
Which you made me just think of something about when you say creativity. I want to add one more thing to the list. Can we get a demo of the new VR headset at CoreTech? Because I think there's a relationship with the virtual environment and the physical environment that's actually going to play into this new definition of real estate. So that's another conversation that it just came to my mind. I don't know how we missed it. Listen, we're going to take a quick break, but before I do, I just want you to give, actually, Ian, if you can bring everybody back real quick. Okay, just one question before the break, and then we'll go to commercial. So going forward, and I want you to think about this as we break. Going forward, technology will significantly impact the workplace, which we talked a little bit about, facility operations, remote capabilities, and carbon footprint. Do you agree or not that technology is going to play a major role in all those things? Don't give me your answer now. Think about it, and we'll answer when we come back from our break. All right, Corning, that's one of the things we need, right? We need fiber, we need network connectivity to make all this stuff happen. That's one of the technologies that we talk about, right? So, Frank, let's start with you. I mean, especially because you had a background with IBM. What role does technology play in this new workplace, this new corporate real estate environment?
Yeah, so Jim, technology's always played an important role in real estate, but I think just given the dynamics of how everything has changed, paradigm has shifted, technology is going to play an incredibly important role in achieving our goals. We have some pretty audacious goals in terms of ESG and some other concepts that we're pursuing. And without technology being at the forefront of those goals, we will not achieve them. And everything from making sure that we provide the best experience for people when they come in so that it rivals being at home, because quite frankly, people have some pretty good setups at home. We've got to create that technology to make sure that the office is better. To managing our facilities and our operations, if we're going to meet some of the goals that we've established in terms of environmental and sustainability goals, we need that technology, not just to report on what we're doing, but to drive the kinds of behaviors and to be able to drive the kind of AI that we're going to need to do that.
Yeah. Well, when I started my career, I went in the office because it had $100,000 photocopier that I didn't have access to. Right? I needed the tools inside the office, right? And then Kinko's FedEx comes along and changes that paradigm a little bit. Now, you're absolutely right. The office experience has to bring a new level of collaboration that people can't get at home as much. And I do think the metaverse and VR could potentially have a role in this. Bobby, I mean, how much does technology involved in your real estate strategy at Meta?
Probably involved in all of it. Realistically for us, I agree 100% with Frank. I think technology has probably always been part of the innovation for real estate tech and how we manage it. But I think moving forward, there's an opportunity not only for sustainability, but reliability, and how we manage utilization, and then also business intelligence, and being able to provide data to leadership to help them understand how to make decisions for the business moving forward, and everything from how not only just the building is working, but who's in the building. Employee experience is a big one for me. you know, the building technologies that we're providing in the future will also help employees have a better experience in the office. So for me, I think technology plays a pretty significant role moving forward, more than what we've ever seen in the past.
Right.
If you want to put my dream headset on what I think the future looks like, especially when it comes to VR and AR, there's a lot of opportunity. We're already exploring, BIM models in VR and being able to walk around buildings and understand, where HVAC ducts are going to be in comparison to other equipment that is going to be hanging in the same area. We're looking at being able to do training with our physical security teams using with BIM modeling on, what they're going to actually have to do in managing a building, and being able to provide, a visual versus, a 2D copy of something, a drawing or a CAD drawing, being able to have people explore what a building could potentially look like in VR. And, beyond that, there's a lot more capabilities from a design aspect as well. So I think you're going to see, technical innovations impact what we do for buildings in the future pretty significantly, and then tie in AI. I think we become more efficient, more optimized, and ultimately provide a better experience for employees using life.
Yeah, I just keep going back to the thought that a lot of this innovation in the built environment will happen in Silicon Valley, just because of the tech DNA that exists there, right? It's a natural extension of what the company does. Guys, we only got to 2 questions, which I knew we would, but I do want to get to one final question. Frank, we'll start with you. Core Tech 23 coming up, and then we got BuildingsAI on the backside of it, at Meta's headquarters in the museum, one of the coolest places I've been as far as workplace type facilities, event space. What are you looking to bring to Core Tech, and what are you looking to get out of it?
Well, so let me start with what I'm looking to get out of it, Jim. We in the corporate real estate environment are always focused on so many different things, and it's hard to get a grasp on the latest innovations, the best technologies that are out there, best practices, and so forth. And so one of the things that'll be really important for people that sit in my seat is to really go to places to the function, and to look for the innovations that are going to help us move the dial on some of the things that we are focused on accomplishing. And Realcomm has always driven that kind of an audience, and the exhibitors and so forth that help drive the industry forward. So that's one of the things that I'm absolutely looking to get out of it. In terms of what I'm looking to bring to it is my experience on the necessities of the corporate environment. As an example, for a company like ours, the greatest amenity for us going forward is going to be people. People in the office are going to drive getting other people to come in, so we continue to sponsor that community, that collectiveness, and so forth. And so being able to come to Realcomm and to be able to talk about the needs of the corporate environment, and to talk about the experiences that we have, will then help these innovation companies, these tech companies as well, further think about how they can solution for us.
Perfect. Bobby, I know you've got some strong feelings on this as well. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'll start with what I feel like we bring to the table in regard to this conference, and just having the opportunity to support community in this space is probably top of mind for me. And then being able to share what we as Meta have been able to accomplish over the past 10, 12 years of the organization, and the creativity on how we engineer and architect our buildings, and how it flows for the employees and the employee experience. I'm hoping that it's an opportunity for the rest of the real estate community to take some things away as you leave, as an experience and an understanding, and hopefully something that we can share, that maybe it might be something you want to do as well. But then on top of that, I think, what I'm looking for is more knowledge. I think we want to understand what others are doing. We don't want to think we know it all. We definitely need to understand what the rest of the real estate technology folks are doing, and real estate people are actually building towards. What are your strategies? What are your problems? What keeps you up at night? What are you looking for? Because there might be some nuggets of some strategic nuggets that we need to really think about that we might not be thinking about today. I said it earlier, Jim, before we came on, we're coming out of our teenage years. We're getting into our 20s as an organization. And so I think being more mature about what we're trying to do moving forward and partnering with folks and building community is really what we're hoping to accomplish with this conference.
Since we started this organization over 25 years ago, the whole idea was this was going to be a big lift. No one person, no one organization wants to do it on their own. And the more we can get people in a room to collaborate, share, not just successes, but failures as well, right? It's hard to admit failures, but if you can help somebody avoid going down the wrong road, immensely powerful, right? And we've had so many of those case studies. Guys, we are out of time. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to do this. Frank, we know you're going to be running out of here and probably jumping in a cab or an Uber. Thank you for finding the time in the airport to do this. Bobby, thank you for everything you've done, in addition to being co-chair, but helping us get set up at Meta. You guys have been such great hosts so far. And we're looking forward to showing off a little bit of what, I know you say teenager, but, between the wireless and the facility and other things you're doing, the AR, VR, I think we're going to be in a good home for CoRE Tech 23 and BuildingsAI this year. So thank you for that as well.
Awesome.
Gentlemen, we'll be back in touch. You have a great weekend and be safe. Travel well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Wow. I mean, what a way to kick off Realcomm Live, going live again. You've got more experience. Those two gentlemen, obviously Kay never made it. Her plane from London may have been delayed. We'll catch up with her later. If that's just any indication of the kind of conversations we're going to be having at CoRE Tech 23 and BuildingsAI, it's going to be a wild ride. So with that, let's go back to my favorite segment. One of my favorite people, Howard Berger, give us the news. Let me get out of your way. I know we're behind, but hand it off.
Thanks, Jim. And thanks, Bobby, Frank, for being our CoRE Tech chairs. This was a great conversation today. What a great way to bring the show back for the fall season. So what I do now is I'm going to give you a couple of news stories from our weekly news briefing. It goes out every Thursday morning. If you don't see it in your inbox, just go to realcomm.com and click on news. So our leads I'm going to do this kind of quickly. So our lead story comes from Greg Fitzpatrick. He's the business development leader for Cochrane Supply and Engineering, but he's also executive director for the RECC, the Real Estate Cyber Consortium. And first, a little background. RECC's roots go back to June 2016, when at our Realcomm conference, we assembled a private meeting of industry tech leaders, some CIOs, CTOs, CISOs, who started getting really concerned about cyber threats to the operational technologies in their real estate assets. Now RECC represents over 45 leading organizations, represents like 12.5 billion square feet, commercial and industrial property that generate in excess of 280 billion in annual revenue. The work product that's been coming out of RECC has become the foundation for our annual cyber forum. That's our pre-conference event we have at Realcomm every June. And now in this article, Greg addresses and challenges owners and operators with what they face with OT cyber and the need to continually evolve what he's calling their OT cyber playbook. And Greg proposes the concept of what we call cyber harmony, which orchestrates the collaboration between multiple project stakeholders, incorporating best practices, owner project requirements, specifications, and procedures that need to be implemented by the system integrators responsible for OT and buildings. Now, if you're dealing with OT cyber, I encourage you to take a few minutes and read this important article. Next, from this week's technology partner, an article entitled IP Edge Controllers by Mark Peacock. Mark's Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at Linkspring. And for you not aware, edge computing refers to connecting and collecting and processing data at the device level, rather than at a centralized server, cloud, or remote data center. And it allows execution of applications at a place where you can process and analyze data as close to the original sources as possible, hence at the edge of the network. And in the context of building automation and integration, it increases speed, scalability, security, bandwidth conservation, and overall reduces the latency and the operational cost. This is a great article from Mark, and I would encourage everybody to give it a read. Next, since 2012, we've been profiling and showcasing some outstanding examples of technologically advanced smart buildings and campuses and portfolios. And this week, we're featuring Kingset Capital's Fairmont Royal York in an article entitled Electrification to Decarbonize a Historic Landmark. So the Fairmont Royal York, it's a really classy, elegant hotel with a romantic atmosphere. It was built in 1929. It's in the heart of Toronto, across from the Union Station. And like many historic buildings, it undergoes periodic upgrades and guest-facing facilities such as rooms, meeting areas, and amenities. Kingset, the building owner, began a year-long energy retrofit in 2022. It's an electrification product, heat pumps, etc., to eliminate an estimated 7,700 metric tons of CO2 emissions annually, which could save over $2 million in operating costs per year. Now, the project proceeded. This was the tricky part. While the hotel was operational, and it wasn't without challenges, including a lot of proposals that were rejected because they didn't meet the hotel's high aesthetic standards. So, fantastic project. Please familiarize yourself with it. Great job, Kingset. Next, this is kind of funny. TikTok has become the latest company to enforce a return to office mandate, which is set to come into play in October. And it looks like they're employing some pretty extreme moves. So TikTok started using a software program called MyRTO to enforce their back to office mandate. It monitors badge swipes, tracks the comings and goings of their employees, and is directly linked to the company's existing software and IT services. Now, employees that don't check into the office are going to have a lot of explaining to do. Now, this is funny. One report states that non-compliant employees may not get their lunch stipends. So all you no-shows, no soup for you. Finally, another iconic Canadian project. Oxford Property Groups announced their new Vancouver high-rise called The Stack. It's officially open, and it's the first net zero carbon high-rise in North America. 37 stories, 550,000 square feet, office tower in downtown Vancouver, and features like this twisting stack box design. Now, Oxford said they achieved zero carbon through low carbon building systems, high performance triple plane glazing, along with smart building technology to optimize energy management and building performance and enable preventative maintenance. They have a rooftop solar array designed to deliver 26,000 kilowatts of energy. So we're going to be keeping an eye on this project to see how it plays out and whether it could actually be our next new net zero carbon milestone for urban architecture. So that was just a few of this week's highlights. Wishing you all a great weekend. And Jim.
You had me at no soup for you. That's fun.
I mean, really.
Yeah. I mean, the next phase, the big conversation that's coming a million miles an hour is going to be privacy. I mean, we've been on it for 15 years. We knew everything was getting put in place. It's getting easier to violate privacy. It still matters. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out. So Howard, great job calling through the hundreds of articles that make no sense and finding the ones that do. You do a great job, and appreciate you. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Jim. You too.
All right. So before I wrap the show, we're going to hear from our final commercial. I'm going to come back and give you a little bit of update on what we're going to be talking about next week. All right. So you heard me mention BuildingsAI. It's an event that we're tacking onto the back of CoreTech 23 at Meta's headquarters. And we decided after the rush of interest on artificial intelligence at the conference, Realcomm and IBCon this summer, that we needed to focus on AI. There is more hype, more misinformation out there, And we are going to spend the next 2 months digging for all the legitimate, authentic conversations as it relates to AI in the built environment. It is not an easy task. You have to sort through hundreds of ideas, hundreds of presentations, decks, pitches to understand what's real and what's not. So far, we've got some real winners. We've got some technologies that are going to be legitimate, have legitimate impacts on the built environment. And then we're also going to try to dispel some of the myths and some of the overhype that is absolutely out there in the marketplace. So if you're interested in AI in the built environment, which you really should be, because it is going to have an impact, this is going to be a place where you can dedicate one day, get around like-minded people, close the doors, roll up the sleeves, and get to the bottom of what the impacts artificial intelligence are going to have on the built environment. And that ranges everything from back-end operations to how does it impact how we use the space. If we had 25 traders sitting at desks and all of a sudden that's all being done by AI, what's the impact to utilization, which was a topic we talked about. So it's going to be a wide range of topics, but one you're not going to want to miss. So next week, we're going to have the two chairmen, Wayne Campbell, a leading consultant out there, came from the real estate industry and is focusing on AI and is really helping us put together the meaty details that make an event like this work. And then Sundar Papu, SVP, Head of Technology and Strategy for Inland, a CIO within our real estate community, has really taken the lead inside Inland as well as the community. He and Wayne gave presentations at Realcomm and IBCon, did some demonstrations, and are just committed to the topic and are willing to give us their time and energy to make sure this is a great event. So mark your calendars this fall, November 15th, 16th, I believe are the dates. Check our website to make sure. CoreTech 23, day 1, BuildingsAI, day 2, in Meta's headquarters in the museum event space, which you've never seen anything like it. If you're a corporate or commercial real estate folks looking to find what new spaces are going to look like, this is going to have some great ideas for you. So with that, great to be back. Great to have you here with us. Looking forward to the continued conversations. We will see you next week on Realcomm Live. Have a great weekend and be well.